If you're building a distributed engineering team and you want to hire the best and the brightest from around the world, you're going to want to listen to today's episode with Vijay Krishnan, CTO of Turing.com. Welcome to the Productive AI podcast, where we aim to simplify AI and make it more accessible to business leaders. I'm your host, Troy Angranon, and today we're talking to Vijay about what he and his co-founder are doing in this rocket ship company they're building to help provide fantastic, interesting engineering jobs to folks all over the world. Vijay, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks, Troy.
Also, at the end, what we're going to do, I've already given Vijay a little heads up on this. If you stick around, I'm going to ask him at the end for his thoughts on advice to AI company entrepreneurs and founding teams, given that he's building a company with a huge AI focus, as well as what to think about if you're interested in being in the engineering side of an ML or AI career, and how to think about developing your career in that space. He has a long history in the space going all the way back to 2007 before ML was cool. So we'll talk about that at the end. Before we get there, let's dive into the meat of the conversation. So now, Vijay, I kind of just touched on it, but you have an extensive background. You started in ML way before it was cool back in Yahoo in 2007, 2008. Did you sort of plot out your career and end up here, or do you look backwards from here at all the steps and say, those things led me here and this is how I got here? So I'm curious about, the path you took and how long you've been in the field and how you arrived at this company.
Yeah, great question, Troy. So I don't know that I I did believe AI would be big, but nobody could have quite predicted necessarily that this 2012, 2013, basically the reboot of neural networks by way of deep learning would take AI to a whole new level. In fact, I think my earliest entry into the field of AI was back in my undergraduate days, back in 2003. I had started to write some strong papers on the applications of machine learning in different conferences like SIG-IR, EMNLP, and so on. So at that, I would say until 2007, I was doing this both back at IIT Bombay and at Stanford University as an AI researcher, really. As you said, 2007 onward, I started applying this to problems in the industry. I think personally, I like I have always been a lover of probability and statistics, which is so much at the foundation of a lot of modern machine learning. And it just happened to be something that I loved, I was good at, and that seemed to have some practical value. I didn't know it would be this much practical value at that point.
And then, now, where did you go from Yahoo?
So I was a scientist at Yahoo in their machine learning team, applying ML to problems in text categorization, personalization, and so on. I started my previous company, Rover, soon afterward. So we started off doing personalized search. We did that for a certain period of time, and then later moved into the space of personalized content discovery instead. So I ran that company for a while, and that company got acquired about 4 years back. So when it came to personalized content recommendations, what we did was we based on your past web browsing data, we would build deep user profiles the same way Google and Facebook builds deep user profiles, and we would use that to recommend other content that you may like. So a lot of machine learning went into categorizing your content, figuring out what your interests are, then doing the same when it came to new novel stories. At that point, we had to both figure out topicality of different stories as well as how interesting they would be. Ideally, you want a story that matches your interests as well as is interesting in absolute terms.
And you had some huge reach. This was Rover, which was acquired by Rev Content, and if I remember, it was something like 1.5 billion users monthly or something. Like, it had huge scale.
That's right. That's right. So that's right. So Rover itself got to 40 million registered users, and I think after our acquisition by Rev Content, we certainly got to reach a much larger scale, applying our technology to Rev Content. So Rev Content certainly saw billions of over a billion monthly unique visitors across a whole range of their publisher partners. It was very exciting to deploy our personalization technology to data of that scale.
Excellent. Now, you ended up as an EIR, an entrepreneur in residence, at Foundation Capital at some point. What was the story? How did you make that transition? Because that's a big leap, going from this long engineering arc into EIR, an EIR role at a VC firm, basically.
Right. So I think EIR roles at different firms, VC firms, tend to be kind of different. I think certain EIR roles have a certain degree of I would say responsibilities. I guess you're expected to assist with the due diligence, or you're expected to help out the VC with their day-to-day. The EIR position of me and my co-founder wasn't quite like that. I think it was more like we were figuring out what company to build next. We liked Ashu, who's general partner at Foundation Capital. And Ashu basically told us, as you guys figure out what next startup you want to do, how about you do it in our offices with the position of EIR, no responsibilities. If you ever want to brainstorm an idea, if there's any way I can help, I'll be happy to help. And do give us a chance to invest whenever it is you start your company.
What a fantastic spot. I actually think of those, that's more of an entrepreneur in waiting role, right? You don't have any day-to-day admin responsibilities. You're sitting there exploring. How long did that take? It was 4 or 5, 6 months or something? What were you looking for while you were there?
So I think we had sort of, obviously, we knew one of the important things we learned from our last company was that it is really you once you start a company, you take an investor money and everything. You really don't have a lot of time to sit back and reevaluate everything from first principles. If you ever want the time, you have maximum freedom at your disposal with regard to what company you wish to start, what space is it, and so on, where you can change your mind several times a day. It is before starting a company. So in fact, due to as a result of our previous company exit, there were investors, particularly investors in our previous company, that were telling us things like this: well, I know that you and Jonathan are going to start a company soon. How about you just set up a company, take our money, and then figure out what to do with it? We said no, we don't want to start our timer. We want to sit back and think. There are at least like a 50 or 100 people that we want to catch up with, that we want to pick the brains off. A lot of our smart friends doing various cool things in the technology industry, in AI, and various other things. And meeting 100 people, sitting back and thinking about the conversation takes a lot of time. I mean, there's only 30 days in a month. So it turned out. And to be fair, at that time, it wasn't like all meetings were on Zoom. If all meetings were on Zoom, then we could perhaps be doing 4 or 5 every day with a commute to San Francisco and everything. We were maybe looking at no more than 2.
Right.
And so that is what that was our main motivation, really. While we had I want to say, 1 month into our EIR, we kind of knew that we wanted to do something like Turing, which is the company that we went on to start eventually. But still, we came at it from plenty of different perspectives. We talked with companies in the recruiting space itself. We talked with companies we talked with hiring managers at large enterprises regarding what their pain points were, who are the kind of vendors they work with, and so on. Whether what they thought of a Turing-like idea. We certainly talked with other people in large IT outsourcing, in small software dev shops. I even spent 1 week as an uninvited guest in one of these recruiting agencies. I kind of knew the founder, and I actually drove down to LA, spent a week, and I basically said, can I watch what your recruiters do all day and what their workflow is and everything? he was surprisingly pretty generous enough. He was like, well, as long as you don't stop them from selling, I'm cool. Feel free to watch. As long as you don't stop them from doing their work or stop them from getting more business, I'm cool with that. And
Yeah.
so I think that sort of thing really helped us understand the space in a very, very deep way. And I'm very, very glad we did that. I mean, that sort of freedom is something. If once you start a company, you can just spend 6 months trying to learn more and do nothing more, nothing with your company.
Yeah.
It's pretty much like growth that matters above all else. So the market puts a huge premium on growth. Growth is what makes it exciting for founders. It's what makes it exciting for employees. It's what makes it exciting for investors and basically everybody.
Yeah. What a cool opportunity to have the opportunity to sit back, do the time, have the 100 conversations, and do the thinking, because the deep thinking is something that probably a lot of us don't have time for, don't make time for, create time for. So what an incredible opportunity.
Absolutely. And in fact, another thing I did, which I really loved during that period, was also, I mean, while I had obviously published in AI, I had done commercial things in AI, all sorts of things in the last 3 or 4 years. I think there was just so much new stuff in there that I just did not have enough time to keep up. So I had put for myself a giant stack of papers and books and technical reports and things like that, and I actually got time to read that. It's interesting how often one doesn't even get a chance to make enough time for that sort of thing.
That's fantastic. Okay, so then I'm curious about your process that you went through. You had these conversations. I'm curious about how you went from a universe of possibilities to a solar system and then down to, a single idea. Because I think that's a pretty interesting process for any entrepreneur founding team.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a great question. So I would say there are a number of things that to keep in mind when thinking of what company you wish to start. First of all, you want to make sure that you have a really large market on your hands. I mean, if if the market is not large enough, that inherently caps how big you can become, and that sort of really feeds into everything. Like investors become less interested. I mean, basically, it's that is something you want to figure out. The second thing is you certainly want to understand what the nature of the I guess what the nature of the competition is, and what the offerings are today like, and do you uh, do you credibly have an opportunity to offer something that is 10 times better than what customers have access to today? Since if you're only marginally better, you're going to have a hard time selling into that market. I mean, the market may be theoretically very big, but you may have those sorts of situations are not fun. I mean, the ideal kind of situation is something where you have a really large market, you have a market that also has enough of a budget and enough of a pain point where almost nobody is able to serve them quite to their satisfaction, and you are able to do much better. And in a weird way, it would be great if even with your V1 that you as a company would not be proud of, if your customers are delighted with your V1, because that is just so much better than everything that is. And hopefully with version 2, version 3, you just blaze ahead of the competition more and more. That is the sort of market and the opportunity you want to go after. And again, it is so important to do this thinking early, because this is the one thing you can't change. You can change track with regard to, well, should my technology do A, should it do B, how best do I solve this problem? This is pretty much like the soul of the company. And in addition to everything I mentioned right now, of course, one last very important thing is, why are you the right people to be doing this company? The founder market fit. I think at Turing, this was one of the. I mean, there were many factors in favor of Turing as we could see it, but founder market fit was definitely a very strong one. Like, we had even evaluated some other ideas relating to AI to help with better sales and all sorts of and other ideas too, where I do believe we would have potentially started and run good companies. But we asked ourselves, are we really 10 times better than the next best entrepreneur we know in this space? Or could, people come at the same thing from a different angle? Could there be somebody that understands the sales domain so well that even though they are not as strong as us when it comes to AI, they would still end up building as good a product, for example? But when it came to the Turing offering, I think we had a lot of unique experiences. I think that made us somewhat more uniquely qualified, I think, to start a company like this one. First one is, of course, the fact that both of us are basically, I guess, computer scientists turned entrepreneurs ourselves, and that certainly was helpful. Another thing that was very, very helpful was the fact that by some form of brute force, we had kind of stumbled into the idea of Turing into our previous company itself. So we faced this problem firsthand. We were always very, very picky with our software engineer hiring standards. I think we did just fine, I want to say, until maybe 2013 ish or 2012 ish. After that, hiring just became excruciatingly hard. It was very, very clear to us that we would have to either lower standards, or we would just keep interviewing, and we would never be able to close the people that we wish to close. So we ended up sort of over time doing a lot of things, doing experiments that worked. So some worked, some did not work, but eventually we figured out how to work with some really exceptional remote engineers in Russia, Ukraine, Poland, Romania, India, someplace in the Middle East, Poland, and so on. And we also figured out how best to make this distributed team work. I can't say we honed it to a science the same way we did at Turing, but it was very, very clear to us that there is something really, really powerful here. If we are able to get if you are able to figure out a way to hire and effectively work remotely with the Silicon Valley caliber engineers in other parts of the world, we don't have to get into this fist fight with Google, Facebook, and everybody else in the context of local hiring. That was pretty much our insight at that time. I think in 2018, when we were talking about this made sense to nobody. And now I suppose that could be a good thing, or it could be it could be a bad thing, or it could be an exceptionally good thing if virtually nobody else is able to see it. But yeah, to us, I think, venture capitalists couldn't see it. They said that, well, everybody should sit in the same office, and we would keep having these discussions with them. Come on, this situation is untenable. What are you talking about? And so sooner or later, I think venture capitalists started changing their mind. I would say even before COVID. I think by I want to say even by early 2019, many of them were singing a different tune. They were like, you know what, we were pushing our founders to keep hiring, but they were not able to make very much by way of progress. So we've come around to the idea of remote hiring being the way to go. And of course, COVID is a completely different story. That's like taken this to stratospheric heights.
Seeing the general trajectory, seeing the fact that you had that pain, and then validating that when the venture capital companies were saying, okay, we're now starting to see the same pain that you've already told us about showing up in our portfolio companies where they can't make the hires they need.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. And believe it or not, if you now COVID has so much colored our perspective, but if you look at some of the articles in Jan 2019, right? And not Jan 2020, Jan 2019, it talked about 2019 being the year of remote. You would see so many articles. If that is the year of remote, I don't know what 2020 is. But yes,
hyper remote.
Yeah. But compared to
distributed,
I think that was absolutely correct. In fact, even at Turing, we could see the difference in people's willingness. Admittedly, it was not a mainstream thing, but there were just far more early adopters willing to come on board with this idea in 2019. I mean, we could even see the shift happening before our eyes. There would be some customers that come up and say, I like the idea of high quality engineers. I don't quite like the idea of remote. I think I'll continue with local hiring. No, thank you. And after 3 months, they come back. You know what? I'm tired of this. I'm not able to. The people who want to join me, I don't want them. The people I do want to go to Google instead. So let's give Turing a try. So we did see that shift happening even then. But yeah, of course, I could have never predicted 2020.
So I want to rewind. There are so many good points in there. One is, I love your 10x metric. Do you know the 9x rule, which is basically the same thing? Have you ever heard of that one?
I have not.
that customers always overvalue what they have today, whether it's do it yourself or just doing it by hand or whatever. They overvalue today's solution by 3x, and they undervalue your new solution by 3x. So you have to be 9x better or more in order to get above the threshold condition beyond which they'll take action.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I have never heard it articulated this way, but yes, I agree.
Yeah. And then on the next point, so you had these pains, you were working in Rev Content, you were building these distributed teams and kind of figuring out how to make that work. When you went into Foundation as the EIR and you were kind of brainstorming all these ideas, having these other conversations, how quickly did you go from a universe of other possibilities, including this one, down to maybe a small handful or 2 or 3 ideas, and then down to saying, okay, this is the one?
So, I guess we wanted to give ourselves enough time there, so we did take a couple of months. I think over time, yeah. I want to say there was a good period of like I want to say at least 2 months when we wanted to be as open-minded as possible. But it's almost like this idea had a certain force of gravity. It went on dragging us into this. Okay.
It won't let go.
At some point we were like, okay, how open-minded do we want to be really? This is so obvious. How much more time do we want to waste exploring other things? It was sort of like that.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the idea that won't leave you alone, you finally say, okay, we're gonna really explore this. Maybe that's a couple months in, and then was the rest just figuring out, okay, if this is really the thing we're gonna focus on, like how do we go to market? How do we build this thing? What was that next few months before you sort of exited and started the thing?
Yeah, so I think that was exactly the time when I spoke with so many different. I spoke with so many different staffing companies of different types. I understood the staffing industry. I understood the economics. I understood what they do. People doing local, people doing remote, people doing outsourced, the various sizes. Talked with so many founders of different different sort of outsourcing or services companies, even talked with a lot of engineering leaders with regard to what their pain points were, what their hiring process was. Then even people selling to companies of various selling some kind of hiring related solutions to companies of different sizes. Then I mean one useful thing we learned during that period is you certainly want to talk to your prospective customers, but you also kind of want to talk to people who have attempted to sell similar things to your prospective customers, because often they give you a lot of leverage feedback. They might tell you things like, well, these such companies will express interest, but they'll really waste your time, and those people just won't close, or something else. Like in some ways, when you talk to one customer, you get one data point. But when you talk to some people who have already tried to sell to various people who have succeeded, some failed in some other cases, you get a lot more leverage feedback. It's like you're getting 100 data points at once. So we did a lot of that, I think, to try to put together a very coherent model, because of, I suppose, what our initial attack vectors would even be. Like, we can't focus on everything in the very beginning. There's got to be some kinds of customers that will likely close more easily. There's got to be, so I think that was our primary thing. And this also had one strong benefit in that it helped us better understand what this whole I guess what sort of players and what kind of people participated in the whole, let's say, industry that is devoted to solving some kind of recruiting needs, either within large companies, small companies, and so on. And that even helped us sort of better understand the kinds of people we could hire thereafter.
Okay, so let's dive into the company and the kind of the product. So you go through this arc, you're building these distributed teams, you learn all these lessons. The idea won't let go. You validate the idea, you have all these conversations, and you say, okay, we're going to commit and we're going to do this thing, and this is what it's going to be, is this kind of recruiting platform. I don't know if you have a better word for it. So let's talk about what it is at a high level. So for somebody who's never heard of you before, how do you generally, what's your language for explaining what this thing is and what it does and why it's 10 times better than anything else they're doing today?
Great. So Turing helps US companies hire exceptional pre-vetted software engineers from all over the world. We ultimately we have a software developer pool of more than 200,000 software developers around the world. We put our developers through a series of tests followed by interviews that test for a whole bunch of things, including computer science fundamentals, algorithm skills, specific tech stack related skills, like are you strong with as a React front-end engineer? Are you strong as a Node backend engineer? Are you good with GraphQL or some MongoDB or some other database? All sorts of things that are relevant to different software development roles. Additionally, we also test for soft skills to things like proactivity, communication skills, where even communication breaks down into raw English fluency and also into, I guess, how efficient and clear of a communicator are you? Are you the sort of person that one can have a clear technical discussion with, and so on? So we test for a lot of these different things, and this sort of thing is sometimes we internally call this seniority as well, as opposed to just seniority obtained from number of years of experience. Like this kind of communication is often has a lot more in common with the maturity itself, in a sense. So we assess for a lot of these things, and once we do this, we have a much deeper profile of a developer compared to what is obtainable from a resume alone. And we use these deep developer profiles to match developers to jobs where they are most likely to excel. So from a perspective of a hiring manager in the US, if they are very picky about their quality of talent, and they are finding it hard to compete with the Googles and Facebooks of the world, they want to do speed, they want to do quality, they want to do speed, and they also want to do reasonable cost. If they want to do all three at the same time, Turing is the solution for them. So that is our offering to engineering managers and other hiring managers at US companies. Our offering to developers is basically today we have software developers that are registered from more than 140 countries around the world and more than 10,000 cities around the world. So believe it or not, every place in the world is not Silicon Valley. Well, yeah, even the Midwest is not Silicon Valley. I have so many friends working in certain Midwestern states in the US, where there's like one tech company within a 30-mile radius. So and the point is, the offering to software developers is the following: sign up on Turing, take our tests, take our tests and interviews, clear that, and after that you probably never have to interview for a job again. We'll do all the hard work. We'll match you with remote opportunity after remote opportunity if you're really strong. Live in any part of the world you like. Live by the beach in a place with really low cost of living, with get a beach house, do whatever you want, and you're still plugged into the world's best technology job opportunities. You still get to grow as a software engineer just like your counterparts in the Silicon Valley, like people like me who are living in the small place in Palo Alto. You can have the best of all worlds as a software developer. So that is our offering to software developers around the world.
Well, I think you probably close them when you say, and you never have to interview again.
Right. Yeah,
That's really compelling. I mean, you're basically saying, look, just kind of like 99 Designs did in obviously a much lower requirement field, where it democratized and said, hey, you can live anywhere in the world and you can be a graphic designer and you can work with great clients all over the world and kind of run your own micro business. You're basically offering the same thing, and I can see that the value proposition to the customer who's, as you said, trying to use job boards, or doesn't know how to access people in various countries, or doesn't know how to vet them, that this would be a huge win.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think from the perspective of a hiring manager, there's just so many different problems to trying to do this from scratch. Because first of all, how would you know where to source? I mean,
right.
we keep getting surprised at Turing. Trust me, when we started Turing, Jonathan and I knew a lot more about remote hiring than anyone we knew. We did not know there exist software developers in 10,000 cities around the world, for sure. And there's so many countries and cities where we find exception. We have matched exceptional developers to our customers today, where we had never even known a single person from any of those countries, leave alone known that they were exceptional software engineers in there. So there is a sense in which I think the greater internet penetration and all this educational material online, these MOOCs and all that, have been a game changer.
Right.
So I'm not certain if they would be able to sort of turn everybody into a software engineer, as they almost seem to be claiming, but they sure as hell are very, very effective when you're looking at the 1% smartest, most motivated and self-driven kind of people. They have a lot more resources to go with. So there are so many exceptionally strong self-taught developers that, and we it is very, very difficult to predict. I think what countries would sort of surprise us in terms of the amount of talent that springs forth from those countries. So first of all, you wouldn't know where to look for them. Even if you did know that they existed in some places, you would not be able to make any sense of their resume. Like today, hiring managers use all sorts of proxies. Well, did this person go to Stanford? Did this person go to Cornell? Who are their past employers? Have they worked at Google? Have they worked at Stripe? Or have they worked at some no-name company whose hiring standards I do not know about? Now, when you're hiring a developer from Vietnam, from Africa, from Russia, someplace else, you as a hiring manager know nothing. You don't know what is a good school. You don't know what's a good university. You don't know what to make of some experience. You don't even know what to make of a job title. Well, what do these people call a senior software engineer again? Is that same as what we call a senior software engineer? So there are all those things. And then there is a matter of, well, there are, if you're doing remote, in theory, the opportunity is very attractive because you have such a large pool to choose from once you relax geographic constraints. But then there is a question of how do you vet them? You can do the equivalent of 5-hour on-site interviews with so many different candidates where you have no idea. I mean, today there's a large degree of resume filtering and everything that happens in the recruiting process. If you can't rely on that anymore, this becomes quite a challenge. Then of
Why
course
can't you
people
rely
are
on that? What's the issue there?
Just because you as a hiring manager in the US, you would have no idea what's a strong university.
For that reason, yeah, right.
Yeah, that's right. So
got it. Yeah, you can't really interpret the resume, essentially, is the issue.
That's right. And many of our, to be fair, many of our developers come from countries where there's probably no university on par with the top 30 universities in the US. But does that mean there don't exist people that are just as smart? Well, absolutely not. There certainly are very talented people. It's just they haven't yet got sort of self-sorted into certain proxies for their skill and other things yet. So,
and I would imagine as a company trying to hire these engineering teams especially as everything's moved offshore over the last 20 years plus, that there's this, as you said, I don't know where to go. I don't know where to source. I don't understand. I have all of these just semantic problems of not understanding their schooling, their job titles, etc. All the things you've just mentioned. And so I think what seems to have happened, and you've seen this probably in spades, is you just see them go, okay, well, we know there are a couple of safe options. We can go to a major kind of staff augmentation shop that's in the Ukraine, or we can go to a major one that's in, pick your top 3 countries. But that leaves out all of this amazing talent that's in these other 9,997, cities in these 137 countries that could be potentially fantastic, but there's just no way to connect the dots. And that seems to me to be the fundamental aha and the value that you are bringing with this platform, is to be able to say, we figured out what the barriers are. We figured out how to solve for those barriers to connect this great talent to this great company and make a win-win for both sides.
Yes, absolutely. And in addition, I would also point one more thing, that even if you were to pick a staff augmentation firm in Ukraine or something else, your choices are still somewhat limited. Maybe they have 500 engineers and you want a team of 20 people. All the 20 had better be in that 500. Like today, we have customers at Turing that have absolutely not had to compromise at all. They might have a team of 20 people, engineers. All 20 are in different cities around the world. They are all experts in their area. There's no compromises. You want iOS engineers with that are experts in a particular narrow skill. I'll find you that one person in the world that is best for that sort of thing. You want somebody else. In contrast, I remember how things worked in my previous startup. Right, like we managed to hire a few really strong Silicon Valley engineers, and when we decided to start building our iOS app, one of our engineers that was fundamentally very strong. Well, he picked it up. He spent 2 or 3 months learning how to build an iOS app, and then eventually got much better at it. But the point is that in a Turing kind of model, no such thing is even necessary. I mean, people can sort of do what they are best at, and even teams ultimately we can put people and assemble these distributed teams where every developer comes from a different city in a manner that makes everyone play to their absolute strengths. And that ultimately unlocks the most value, because a manager is interested in having the most value created for them per day or per month or per dollar, what have you. A developer again has the maximum interest in being in the place where they can be most valuable. I mean, people like to do valuable things. That is what also in the market gets them paid more, compared to a situation where they are not quite playing to their strengths. So there is that angle too. I would add that in addition to tapping into talent from all parts of the world, the ability to put together your perfect distributed team. It's not like those 15 people have to even come from this one city. They can all come from different parts if they are the best for the role.
Team building is hard at the best of times. I've run and been involved in startups where we've had distributed teams, we've had on-site teams, we've had a mix of those. That comes with its own raft of issues where the people in the hallways, back in the days when we had hallways, were making decisions very rapid fire in the hallways because not everybody was in the same set of channels. And then the remote teams would say, when did you make that decision? They'd say 3 minutes ago over coffee, right? We made it, when you weren't around. So I found a lot of these issues around kind of the on-site teams had an advantage versus the remote teams. Of course, with COVID, everybody is a remote member of a remote team at this point. So I think that actually is probably going to make it easier. But my question to you is, how do you pull together a high functioning team? Clearly, you're talking about, let's say, bringing individuals who are playing to their strengths, who are already really good at each of their respective domains. That's already a great start to building a good team. Does Turing provide any sort of framework or management infrastructure, or is that still ultimately up to the customer to then say, well, I still have to have a manager here in my company who knows how to manage all of these cultures and languages and people who live in different time zones? How does that work?
A great question. So this is certainly very important. We certainly don't just leave it to the managers, because from our perspective, we think this opportunity is much is going to be one of the biggest ones of our time. And to make the most of this opportunity, we need to make sure that managers who have never managed remote engineers before or a distributor team before should be able to do it with almost the same ease as managing a local team. And engineers too that have perhaps never worked in a remote job or a distributed team before should be able to do it and be all pretty much as productive as they would be in a local team. So that is what we seek out to do. And how do we do it? Well, we enforce a mix of, I would say, both processes, as well as we also have a product that kind of facilitates exactly this and helps nudge developers toward some of the best practices. So one of the biggest things that we have found to be virtually, I would say, almost non-negotiable is having a certain number of coordination hours, if you will, where everybody is available, and no matter what part of the world they are working out of. So we have practically seen that given that virtually all our customers are in the US, we have seen that something like let's say 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. in the customer's time zone as the coordination hours turns out to be best. And where the idea is that during this time you can be available for quick questions, for meetings, for whatever else, and you get to work the remaining hours of your day on your own time, because ultimately as a software
Right.
developer you probably want some time to yourself too. And we
Right.
have found this 4 hours to be a kind of a nice sweet spot, in the sense it there are enough developers that are kind of somewhat night owls, and this doesn't really stretch them well beyond their comfort zone. And
Mhm.
4 hours also does enough by way of coordination hours and everything. Yeah, so we have found that, for example,
So it kind
even
of
if you
works for
were,
both sides.
that's right. That's right. Yeah, we have found that this one becomes important, though. Very often, discipline is not maintained around this, and then it becomes all over the place. I'll try to talk to these two developers in the morning, but this other guy is not available for a meeting. I try to talk with somebody else. That becomes a
Right.
coordination nightmare. Because again, if it becomes too narrow, then it becomes a situation where maybe you got caught up in something else. You want to grab this person for a meeting. By then, those 2 hours of coordination hours are done, and then you have to wait for another day. So that certainly becomes quite crazy. So I think
Right.
this would be number one. I think number two would be really impressing upon developers the need to be proactive communicators, and even kind of, in a sense, testing for that ahead of time. So
Yeah.
there is a certain kind of, I think, a naturally introvert personality engineer, I think that could be more successful in a local setting. That does become a lot more challenging in a remote environment. One really has
Right.
to over communicate. So we uh, we have a product today that that nudges software developers to do virtual daily stand-ups, where they basically enter what did they do yesterday, what are they planning to do today, are there any blockers, and they also enter something like what is their tentative plan for the week ahead. Okay, I plan to, roughly speaking, work on these things. These I believe would roughly take these many number of hours, and these things get emailed to the manager. This also reduces the need for any miscommunication. Like, one of the standard problems in a completely unmanaged remote setup or an unplanned remote setup is something like a manager complains, well, message sent was not message received. This is what I wanted the developer to do. The developer went off on their own tangent. What this person did in the last week or two was utterly useless. That is not what I had in
Right.
mind. Things of
Mm-hmm.
that sort. That sort of
Yep.
thing again helps nobody. So this yeah, I would say our product that really facilitates transparency, feedback, over communication, and our product also bakes in like performance reviews on both sides, that both the developers and managers can do. This also creates a tighter feedback mechanism regarding how the collaboration itself could be improved, and how better outcomes can be achieved. So. Um, yeah, I think the fact that to summarize, I would say both sound process. Yeah, I think three things really help us solve a lot of the normally happens with remote collaboration. Number one, we select for people that that have the propensity to do this, that are somewhat proactive communicators, effective communicators, and so on. So that is very important. Number two, we we have our processes, the most important of them being the 4 hour time zone overlap with the customer's normal time zone. And
Mm-hmm.
number three would be our product, which encourages a lot of transparency and proactive communication also.
Yeah, and this idea of having the virtual stand-ups, essentially something very lightweight, so it's not a
Hmm.
burden
Yes.
to put the data, because that becomes a problem. Any of these kinds of systems of measurement become a burden, and people just start copy pasting blocks of crap in there. Versus something very lightweight. I have these three things, or these two things I'm working on today, full stop, and then these two things for the rest of the week. I think the
Hmm.
lighter the better, and I think we've probably all been subjected to these terrible kinds of systems. So I'm very empathetic to anybody who has to fill something like that out every day. So it sounds like a very
Absolutely.
lightweight reporting mechanism, so that everybody has shared situational awareness of what everybody else is working on. Pretty standard stand up sprint planning and daily planning stuff.
Absolutely. And even from a manager's perspective, right? If you write a large blob of text, it helps nobody. It's not like the manager will have an easy
Right.
takeaway with regard to what is this person up to again.
Well, and
If
especially across multiple languages and cultures,
Sure,
simpler
sure.
is better.
Sure. Though to be fair, in our case, all our developers are English speaking and work directly with the manager. So that is certainly
Okay.
something we filter out for. I think it would certainly be a lot harder as a problem if you did not have English speaking developers. I do believe that would cause that would cause a lot of collaboration problems. In fact, I'm actually looking forward to AI solving that problem. I mean, I'm
I was going to say, you're an ML guy. I mean, can't you just put a live translator in there and just make it all go away?
yes,
Not quite yet.
so Google is certainly getting there. So
Yeah.
for example, my father-in-law, and my mother-in-law also, for that matter, don't speak any English, but Google Translate works like a charm. I speak in English, it translates it into their language, and vice versa.
Which
We
is
just have to speak slowly.
great for social conversation. Probably harder to do design specs with.
Yeah, you're right, but I'm very bullish at the rate at which this is going. This is
Yeah,
getting
me
better.
too.
Like 2 years back it was impossible. Now if you kind of speak slowly and do social conversation and short sentences, it works. I would
Yeah.
say that I'll be very surprised if in 5 years, I guarantee it'll be solved. It could be solved in 3 years even, wherein
Right.
we could be having this kind of conversation that we are having right now in different languages with perfect live translation.
Yeah. I just was giving a talk recently and then somebody pointed out, they said, oh, did you know that while you're delivering a talk in PowerPoint, you can just turn on live translation. It'll automatically just listen to you and translate and post it on your slides, which I didn't even know that was a feature. And it's just a button you turn on somewhere. So yeah, this stuff is getting pretty good.
Hmm.
So you said at the beginning of the conversation, this is really currently focused on American customers now, as I would assume that the goal of the company would be to potentially expand that to other non and just US based companies at some point. Is that true, first off? And
So
secondly, how far out would that be if it is true?
So we do have customers in Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, and everything.
Okay. All right.
But I would say that our largest and customers and the places where we do the largest volumes of business and everything are certainly in the US. I think it's a bit difficult to predict. I guess how well this market will evolve. I think the US still appears to be something of a technology center of the world, and the Silicon Valley even more so. So I, I'm not sure. I think it would be an interesting question to see how I suppose how the world itself advances in this regard.
Okay. So let's just say large technology based companies, huge group of them predominantly here in the US, but certainly operating in Western Europe and APAC as well.
Mhm.
Being the customers, the developers being from all over the world, it sounds like, or software engineers. Actually, that was another question I had is what types of roles are we talking about from most senior to most junior? What's the span of kind of types of folks that you're bringing into the platform here?
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, we span the whole gamut on senior to junior. So today, we have found it. I want to say 95%, not 95, maybe 90% of all software developers that we match with companies end up having at least 3 years of industry experience. And though there are some I want to say unusually skilled and also unusually mature junior developers or even developers with zero experience that we have also managed to place. But that is where we are. And when it comes to the whole seniority track, so yeah, I want to say the occasional junior developer, but more commonly the mid-level developer, the senior developer, the tech lead, the eng manager. We kind of span the gamut. And when it comes to skills again, we span the gamut there as well. We do I mean we do front end, back end, mobile, AI, data engineering, basically the whole thing, and a whole bunch of specific tech stacks in these things like Node, React, Angular, um, Java, Python, a whole bunch of these specific skills and technologies as well. So yeah, today I think there's been a nice, healthy demand as well as supply. I think in all these places, invariably at the senior levels, demand tends to exceed supply.
And so again, still staying focused on the roles for a minute. So a lot of this, it sounds like your meat, the core where you started here, kind of entry point is software developers. Do you go into things like project managers and UI and UX designers and, going above and beyond and kind of outside of the general hardcore engineering?
So we have certainly thought about it. I think it's been something of a trade-off for us in terms of, I guess, how much do our customers, how badly do they need some of these roles filled, and how difficult are they finding it to do so today
Okay.
relative to software engineering,
Right.
and then there is also the question of today, in some ways, I think compared to other a lot of other platforms, we are the fact that we are very narrowly verticalized toward software engineering has sort of served us well, because
I would think
it has
so.
allowed to do sourcing very well. It has allowed us to do very, very deep vetting and deep developer profiles very well. If I had to
Right.
start building a deep profile of a designer and a project manager, it would be somewhat different. It would have certain things in common, but we'd have to um, uh, I, I think one thing we have seen with a lot of these companies is that they spread themselves too thin, and are therefore not able to become experts in serving one specific need. What we
Right.
like about the software development need is that we see this as a giant market. I've seen some estimates that put this sort of need as a $300 billion market. I've seen some estimates that put it at $1 trillion market. But whatever it is, market size
It's
is not
big.
what it becomes a function of how much outside our core do we want to go. Do we think we are
Right.
again, I think the same question of this 10x starts coming up. Well, we certainly are operating at the 10x level now. If we keep plugging away at this, we could possibly be 20x better or 30x better. Do we want to do that, or do we want to get into some of these other things where we are maybe currently operating at 2x or 3x better? It's a bit of a trade-off. I mean, I wouldn't rule
Sure.
out that sort of thing entirely in future, but this is what has, I think, kept us a lot more rooted towards software engineering fundamentally. And at least for the conceivable future, I expect this is where we'll put most of our efforts.
It goes back to the beginning of the conversation. Like, find a big market. In this case, it's a market for software developers. Make and access that market globally. In this case, and then the third being, how many roles, how many types do you want to go beyond software developers or engineers into these other roles? And I think we've probably all had the experience of working with recruiters who try to vet candidates and they don't understand anything about what those candidates do.
Right.
And that's terrible for everybody. It's terrible for the
Mm-hmm.
candidate. It's terrible for the company, because then they get handed all these candidates in quotes that are completely off angle and unrelated to what the
Mm-hmm.
actual position requirements are. So I think that the fact that you've decided to focus very, very aggressively and narrowly on software engineering, but at the same time open the aperture on the other end and say, but it's global,
Mm-hmm.
must make you very unique in the space.
I think that is correct. I think it is very, very tempting to sort of get into all these things, because on the face of it, they are somewhat plausible ideas, and they are somewhat good ideas, and I'm sure great businesses are going to be built addressing all sorts of talent shortages and serving all sorts of needs in the remote space. But yeah,
Yeah.
you're correct. I think the often I guess customers don't want someone, don't want to work with a company that offers certain lukewarm offerings. They want a company to work with a company that has that one killer offering that they really want. So
Yeah.
I think that's certainly driven a lot of our thought process in this direction.
Okay, and this is my last question on this. We'll move on to the next section. In terms of software engineers, that can be a broad term. It can mean a lot of things. As you know, this is Productive AI podcast. We talk to AI folks building AI and ML related companies. In that space, of course, is a huge shortage, right, around data
Mhm.
scientists and machine learning engineers. Would they qualify? Do they fit in your bucket? Is that an area that you work with or not?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, I
Yeah,
thought so,
yeah,
but I wanted to
AI and
check.
data science is certainly. I mean, it is something we certainly something we leverage effectively to help get them jobs and match them and build deep profiles and everything. But so, needless to say,
And
given our
that's on
expertise in this,
internally. Yeah, it's in your systems. What? Yeah, what I'm
yes,
referring to is,
yeah,
are
because
you then helping place those folks who are living in these
we do.
10,000 cities who could be really great data scientists or machine learning engineers who are, as you said earlier, learning on all of these awesome online materials. So
Yeah,
they
yes,
would qualify.
Yes, we absolutely do. Yes, we do machine learning engineers, we do data engineers, we do data analysts. We do a whole number of these things. We still consider these to be sufficiently related and very much kind of part of our core.
Okay, excellent. Now, in terms of before we get into sort of about the business itself, now what's the business model here? Is this all staff augmentation? In other words, who do these people work for? Are they working directly for the customer? Are they working for you? Is it a combination? How's that all
So
structured?
I mean, we invoice companies, and for most part, it's a pay as you go model
Okay.
for companies. Though that said, while we don't really lock customers into these long-term contracts or anything of that sort, we generally only take on customers where it's very clear that they have enough of a budget and a need and everything to work with our software developers for many months or possibly even years, should things
Okay.
work out well. I mean, if they are
Right.
not
Of
happy, of
course.
course, they would not. But at least that theoretical possibility should exist. So that is the only kind of offering that is interesting to us and even to our developers, for that matter. Ultimately, our developers want long-term opportunities. They want the opportunity to grow. They don't want to just be doing a bunch of short gigs that
Mm-hmm.
don't really help them grow as a software engineer. So that is, I think, the essence of this. So, and yeah, for companies, it's a pay as you go. We handle developer payments. We handle all those things. Companies don't have to worry about any of that stuff. While we facilitate the collaboration in the manner I described, we don't add any unnecessary friction.
Mm-hmm.
For most part, we attempt to make the developer almost part of like some kind of an integral member of our partner company's team itself. Often our developers work with them just like their other developers and collaborate with them like a core member of their team. So that's pretty much the model. There
So
are some.
it looks a lot more like traditional staff augmentation, where they would come to you, you would help them find them. That person or people would work on their project for a long period of time, months, maybe longer. And then, is there some option there if a company says, "Look, I just want to make an offer to this person, and I want to have them literally, I want to hire them in their home country or bring them to this country or whatever." Is there? I would assume there's some mechanism for that.
Yes,
And
yes,
does
yes.
that happen ever?
Uh, yes, the mechanism does exist. I mean, companies can pay a recruiting fee and do exactly this, much the same way they do with
We
other
do it
sort
today.
of full-time
Yep.
recruiting firms.
Yep.
As for does it happen? It happens, I would say, a small percentage of the time. I think for
Okay.
most part, companies still appreciate the flexibility. Companies still like the fact that in a sense, Turing is in it together with them. For example, suppose I don't know. Let's say a developer quits. Then it's income. The pressure is then on Turing to find them somebody that's equally good to manage the transition, to manage the handoff, to manage all those things. In a situation
Right.
where none of those things happen, of course, companies are sort of on the hook for that stuff themselves. So I think I guess in our classic staff augmentation model, in a sense, we are almost paid in direct proportion to the benefit that the customer derives from us, basically. And so I think this happens, but I want to say this maybe happens 1% of the time, really. And generally, I think companies only do it after they have worked with a developer for a certain period of time. I've never seen anybody that said, you know what, having talked with this developer and seeing your wedding results, I'll handle everything directly. No, I think
Yeah.
companies first like to build that degree of comfort before attempting anything like that.
That makes sense. Now, where does now you as we said at the beginning of the call, you're an ML guy from way back in the day. You've been doing this all the way from school, actually. Is there real machine learning and AI, if you want to go there, or any of these kinds of tools? Do they truly exist inside your platform? And if so, kind of what does that look like?
Sure, sure. So we use it in a number of places, but I'll talk about some of the most exciting and the most impactful places where where they play a role at Turing. I would say it is really in the building of deep developer profiles as it relates to which in turn helps us make make much better quality matches, and even helps us improve our tests itself. So today
Okay.
we think of the whole problem of developer testing and interviewing as a machine learning problem. Really, when a software developer from this country signs up, we don't know anything about them. A priori,
Right.
we think there's a 1 to 2% chance that they would be matchable to a customer. Now,
Okay.
and then the way we see it is, the job of our tests is to be as efficient as possible. And in a sense, if the prior probability is like 1%, can we either move it? Can we make sure that each minute of that we spend testing a developer helps us rapidly move that probability estimate either upward or downward, either go towards 0% or go toward 100%. Don't waste a developer's time with something that doesn't quite give you very much signal. And
Right.
the nice thing now is that because we are because we are a nice sort of vertically integrated solution that goes all the way from sourcing, vetting, matching, and even collaboration after the match, even rematches, all sorts of things like this. We have access to all sorts of data that very many players don't. Like, for example, there are companies that have a SaaS solution for administering programming tests, but they don't have a full cycle data that provides any kind of machine learning based trained data regarding what is actually important. I mean,
Right. Yeah, I mean, these
from
would be traditional, as we talked about, traditional staff aug companies that if you said to them, hey, I want to instrument the apps you're using for testing, pull all the data off, spin it into a database, and then actually use that as part of our deep neural network, they'd say, I don't even know what you just said to me. Like,
right. Yeah.
Okay. So you're basically saying, look, we own this whole process from start to finish. Let's pull off as much data as we can and run it through the tooling that we know.
Right. Yeah, because we also have a lot of nice end-to-end data with regard to, I mean, almost in machine learning parlance, I would say it is ground truth labels. So we can look at all the successful developer collaborations at Turing. We can look at the handful of unsuccessful ones. We can look at other ones where we placed a developer before a customer, but the customer said, well, I talked with this person. I don't think the match is quite right for reasons ABC. This person is not quite it. Now,
Sure.
all these serve as kind of, you can say, positive and negative training examples, and this
Yeah.
helps us in turn tell us what is even important from a vetting perspective. What actually predicts success, in a sense?
Yeah.
What predicts success? What what is an unnecessary?
You're doing feature engineering here. You're basically you're really just using all these inputs and all these outputs as you said, training data to make the system better at matching.
That's exactly right. And today hiring is just it's just a matter of like religious debates. VPs in some
Yes.
company believe this is the right way to vet. Some VPs in other companies disagree. We can try everything, and we can figure out what predicts success with what kind of customers. I mean,
Right.
there are certain kinds of customers where perhaps algorithm skills and data structures and all that really matters. There are other kinds of customers where specific knowledge of your tech stack and being an excellent communicator and having product sense and things like that tends to matter. So
right, there would be no universal algorithm that could predict the best person for all companies, and I'm sure you must end up segmenting your companies into small clusters or clustering them into small clusters where they have you would want similar people for them to achieve certain attributes or whatever.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely.
And
And
so
and it's amazing to see so many of our so many of our earlier intuitions even occasionally pretty much disproved by our end-to-end data like Jonathan and I guess our Stanford grads have worked with I mean, we have seen a lot of the hiring processes at the Googles and Facebooks of the world. Our VP of engineering used to be a former eng manager at Facebook as well, managing a large team and everything. So we brought in certain ideas with regard to what is important, but it was very eye-opening to see what actually matters, how maybe a notion of who is successful doesn't perfectly match our intuition.
That is super cool. And I always laugh because I've had this conversation a lot and people say, oh, AI is so terrible because it's so biased. And I say, have you seen any process run by humans lately? Because they're all terrible.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. I think that's absolutely right. I mean,
We're the worst version of bias. Machines will probably be a step up from where we are.
Right, right. uh,
Excellent.
I have seen. In fact, it's funny. I actually had exactly these kind of discussions with so many AI startups, and I've had this conversation so many times where I asked, "Well, isn't this a really difficult problem for AI to solve?" Yeah, and they asked, Do you know what the humans we are competing against are actually producing today?" And all we have to do is beat that. We don't have to build a perfect AI.
That's right. We have to have 10 times less bias than the humans. And then, frankly, that's
Yeah,
probably a pretty low bar.
that's true.
All right. So let's talk about where you guys are at because you guys just raised another round, I think. So where are you at in terms of stage of the company and funding and all that?
Yeah, yeah.
And
So we just
growth. You've had some crazy growth.
That's right. That's right. Yes, the last year has been very, very exciting. I think we've grown like some 17x or so in the last 14 months, give or take. And
Man.
we recently raised our Series B. So it was a $32 million round that brings our total funding up to about 50 million.
Okay.
So
Sorry,
I
that was
expect
you raised 30 and that's 50 now total
it's close to 50. Yeah,
ish,
I want to say
somewhere in
47,
there.
48 something. Yeah, 47, 48. Yeah, we are touching 50. That's right.
Okay.
And yes, we expect to be scaling up a lot of our efforts rapidly in so many different areas. Investing more in sales, more in marketing, more in content, build more in building developer communities all over the world, more in our AI and our technology, more in, I mean, basically, you should fully expect that as we have raised 10x more money, we would be doing scaling up basically a whole bunch of our exciting efforts 10x as well to benefit more and more companies even more rapidly.
That's so great. How exciting. And as you said, that's the ultimate metric, isn't it? When you kick this thing off, is this market big enough to support potential growth? And if we're 10x better, can we get on that train? And clearly you guys are there. So that's pretty cool.
Mhm.
Now, what's the best place? Well, let me back up. So, what are you looking for now? Clearly, you don't need to go ask the market for software engineers because you have 200,000 of them in your platform. So, what are you potentially looking for that maybe you can't access with your platform that you're building? Like, if you had to just throw that out there to the world and the universe, what do you need in terms of resources, people, team? Is it some of that, sales, marketing, things like that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we are certainly hiring across a whole number of roles, right? Like, and that's right. Sales, marketing, content, business development, product management, and all sorts of things. But I would also add that while we have a large number of engineers, there is a very, very real sense in which I do think the world has something of a shortage of honest to goodness senior engineers. So by that I mean the engineers who are of the exact same caliber as a level 6, level 7 engineering manager at a Google or a Facebook or a Stripe or an Elite even like a director. I mean, there is a very, very real sense today, I think, in which there is certainly a shortage in that area, and
Mm-hmm.
I also expect that part of the reason is just that talented developers. I mean, while talent can get you up to a certain level, you also need kind of the opportunity. You need to be have worked on such problems. You should have worked with such companies on such problems on such scale and all that stuff to actually level up beyond a specific point. So at Turing,
Right.
we are of course doing our best with regard to leveling up developers there. But that said, yes, we would absolutely appreciate more senior engineering leaders join us wherever they are. We certainly can't get enough of them. That is for sure. They end up being disproportionately in demand, and and as for individual developers, I think the more they are able to level up and take more ownership and everything, the more valuable they too would become.
Right. Yeah. I mean, look at your own history, right? You were working on things that were, what was it, 40 million, 400 million users, and then you were into the 1.5 billion users, or 40 million, and then to 1.5 billion. You just have to work on projects that gets that scale, and that's what ultimately gets you to step 5 and step 6
Hmm.
and step 7. And that just there aren't a lot of opportunities to work at those types of scale. unless you're working with some of these projects. So that's a tough one to just develop anyways. So let's kind of summarize this. We're actually over time here, way over time, because this is such a great conversation. I didn't think we'd go this long, but this is so fun, and you've got a lot of lessons to share. So maybe instead of, I think you've shared so many lessons, I'll skip the section I was going to do, which was kind of advice to entrepreneurs. You gave so much great advice at the beginning around, understanding, is the market big, and is this an opportunity, a place where we can grow and the team can be excited and investors potentially can be excited, and how to focus in on an idea, look at a universe, have a lot of conversations, do the deep thinking that's required, and then identify if that is a good opportunity to go after, and if so, how to focus on it really sharp. That alone is great advice across the board. Do you have anything you'd add to that?
When I've been asked to speak on such matters like advice to entrepreneurs, I generally end up spending 75% of the time talking about just this, about make sure you've nailed the market, the opportunity, make sure you've taken your time to get into it, because I really think that is probably the most important part of all. I mean, the other things you can kind of figure out a little bit more on the fly if this scaffolding is in place. But and this is also the thing that maybe people most underestimate. Like there is a sense, I think, in which often there is the idea that you don't engage in any of that. You just build something, you roll it out, you see if it works, but that's nowhere as effective as having done as much research as possible and nailed this part. I mean, ultimately, I heard this. I was a lot younger and I didn't have any gray hair at that point. But when I was a lot younger, I heard of Mark Andreessen say that when it comes to three determinants of startup success: team, technology, and market. Andreessen made the point that market by far rules above everything else. Like a B grade team with B grade technology can win in an A+ market, but the reverse is often very, very difficult. And having run my previous startup and watched the ecosystem, learning from our own experience and everything, I've realized the truth in that. I've seen so many cases now where A+ teams, A+ technology have failed in the wrong market, and I've seen the reverse happen too. So yeah, that is the one thing I would always emphasize.
There's a quote that I love, and I always attribute this to Don Valentine from Sequoia, and I hope it's his quote, which is, always find big, high growth markets, because then even the management team can't screw it up too badly. You get more room for error, right? Because there's just more opportunities to look for, and also if you do make some mistakes, and you will make some mistakes, you can recover them.
Yeah. I mean,
so
maybe
I agree with you. I think market is so critical. All right. Well, actually, one more question for you, and I'm going to let you go. If you are an engineer and you want to get into the space, or you're just at the beginning of your career, any advice for those folks? Because you've had a long and super interesting career in the space.
You're talking AI specifically?
Yeah, ML, AI, let's say specifically, since that's kind of the focus of the show here.
Perfect. Yes, I do have some thoughts. So here again, I'll share maybe what other people are less likely to say, but
Sure.
I believe to be true, since that is what would be most valuable. So here, I would say one of the things that is just not done enough is really understanding the fundamentals, understanding the mathematics, getting enough of a solid grounding in the probability and and statistics and all that stuff. Like, well, I think one of the major problems I see with this thing, with the state of machine learning talent, and I guess what is getting common is a lot of the it seems to be widely believed that the way you become an AI engineer is you don't need to know any of that stuff. You don't need to know what any of these things are doing. You don't need to know how models work. TensorFlow has all that stuff figured out. All you need to do is download TensorFlow, upload a few data sets in it, tinker with it a little bit, and you become an AI engineer. No, the degrees of freedom are just too many. I think there is a sense in which the kind of things you can bring to bear that can make you unlock enormous amounts of effectiveness and efficiencies grow dramatically if you really understand the mathematics behind the stuff, the fundamentals of what the model is doing. What
Mm-hmm.
does this optimization even look like, for example, if the sort of thing that actually even happens in machine learning classes at Stanford or other top universities, the sort of thing where you write your own toy training algorithm. At least you sort of understand what this is doing. You understand what gradient descent is. You understand what the model's constraints are, and so on. So I would this is by far I think the area where I would suggest that more people spend time. And this apart, of course, there is the other angle, the practical angle of this, that you never want to be doing AI for AI's sake. You always want to understand enough business and product. You always want to make sure you're doing like the simplest possible thing that is also maximally effective. You want to put that hat on always. The more
Right.
complicated you do something, the harder it is to extend, the harder it is to draw lessons from that, the harder it's to debug, or odds are maybe you'll have a harder time even getting it past the production team. They may be like, well, your model size is too big, your this thing, it hogs too much memory, it's going to be a
Mm-hmm.
nightmare putting it there, here and there. So yes,
Right.
you do want to understand a lot of those aspects also. So a lot of the pragmatic aspects of it, you need to have this extreme bias toward simplicity and effectiveness at the same time, and really understand the underlying mathematics. Otherwise you're very handicapped. I mean, you're kind of, you know uh, you're walking in some dark alley with nothing to guide you in the right direction.
Yeah. And I think that this is essentially what I'm hearing from you is learn the primitives, learn the foundations, learn them well, and then you can go for the easier tools that sit above it because you know what those tools are doing. You know if they're working, you know if they're going off the rails or leading you astray. But if you don't have that foundational knowledge and you're using those mid-level, let's say middleware type tools, you're just pushing buttons at that point. And if
That's
it
right, that's
goes
right.
and it breaks, you have no idea. You have nowhere to go at that point.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't, I don't know if I would necessarily say do this first versus that, but make sure to understand that this is an important hole that has to be filled first. Even if you started tinkering with the tools first, understand that to become a really effective ML engineer, they assume their job is done. I'm doing,
Yeah.
I know everything an ML engineer needs to know. And
Yeah.
while nothing could be farther than the truth.
What's interesting about that advice, and I've heard this on a couple of my other calls, is you're both telling them to go deeper as well as to go up, and depending which way you draw that stack, but to go down into the foundations of machine learning, but also to think between the up into the product space and then into the business space, and be one of those engineers who doesn't just say, great, I love building stuff, I'll build that, but comes back and pushes back potentially on the product team or the business team and says, we don't need machine learning here, we don't need AI here, we can do this far faster and far simpler if we take a different track.
Mm-hmm.
And that is such an undervalued skill. So I love that you kind of took it in two directions there.
Yeah, absolutely. Because those things go so well together. I mean, often business doesn't quite understand what AI can do. They don't have the full picture. If the
Right.
AI people don't quite understand what's important there either, you always have this disconnect. And we have all seen this. We have seen so many of these companies doing these massive investments in AI, and with nothing to show for it
Yeah.
ultimately.
Yeah. Well, that's bringing us to the end of the conversation here. So I've really appreciated all this time, Vijay. I'm sorry this went longer than we originally intended. So, quick question for you: what's the best way for folks to connect with you? Is it just the website? Are you good with LinkedIn? What kind of connection points would you like to leave here? And I can put them in the show notes.
Well, if you're interested in a remote job at Turing, certainly sign up on Turing.com as a developer and get started with our process. If you're an entrepreneur or a hiring manager that wishes to hire software engineers, again, you spend 2 minutes filling our form and telling us what you want, and we'll help you there. Now, if people wish to personally connect with me, yeah, LinkedIn would be a good place. I'm pretty generous with accepting LinkedIn connection requests, and I try to be as helpful as I can be to aspiring ML engineers and entrepreneurs and basically everyone else. within
Excellent.
reason. I'm not always as responsive as I'd like to be, but I do respond to a lot of them, and as promptly as I can.
Okay, that's great. Well, I'll put that in the show notes and everybody will be able to find you there or just look you up there. So thank you so much for coming on today. This has been super cool and I really appreciated you making time, especially since it was just my cold outreach to you this week. I saw your fundraising raise and what you were doing and I was so blown away by it. I had to just get you on and to talk to you about this. Thanks for coming on.
Perfect, right? Thanks a ton.
And that brings us to the end of today's Productive AI podcast with Vijay Krishnan from the Turing.com team. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Please check out the show notes as we discussed, and you'll find links to all the things that we just talked about in terms of contact points. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we will see you on the next episode.